So ladies and gentlemen, it's great to have you along to our webinar today where we are discussing a new approach to adult equivalent methodology. To help us better understand the research that has been undertaken and what's involved, we have with us Ian McLean and Shane Blakeley from Bush AgriBusiness Proprietary Limited who undertook the study. To give you some background on our presenters, Shane has a degree in veterinary science and has comprehensive experience in extensive and intensive agriculture in both Australia and overseas. And Ian has a background in accounting and agribusiness and works with the beef business across Northern Australia. So Ian and Shane, it's over to you.
Thank you, Greg, and good afternoon, everyone. Get straight into it. This is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about why the AE methodology is important, how it was developed, what it does, what an adult equivalent is, and how you can use it. So why is it important? Well, the term AE is fairly widely used but not consistently defined or applied. There was no clarity on the relative AE ratings of classes or the treatment of weight gains, pregnancy or lactation. How weight gains are treated usually wasn't, and it was inconsistent in terms of pregnancy and lactation for different reproductive levels. And we saw that there was a need to have an accurate and defendable methodology for calculating the grazing loads, for use in stocking rates, valuations, and also in detailed financial analysis, which I do. Common usage of using breeders or number of head to describe the carrying capacity of value of a property or a station are problematic. For instance, two examples, the place will run 2,000 breeders or carry 2,000 head. They're very different depending on the structure of the business. For example, and it's a fairly extreme one, 2,000 breeders, which is a weaner operation, selling the steer straight off mum, will be a bit under 3,500 AE. Whereas if it's growing them out to bullocks, it's going to be up over 5,500 AE. So quite a difference in grazing pressure. We'll see a graph on that in a minute. Likewise, it'll carry 1,000 head. If they're Hereford bullocks, that could be over 1,500 AE, but Brahman weaners, 820 AE. So a bit of a difference there. This is just a table to show that example again with 2,000 breeders for weaners versus bullocks. And you can see there, if they're grown out to bullocks versus weaners, there's quite a difference in the number of head or number of AE carried. So we're suggesting that the number of AE is a better way of looking at a place rather than the number of breeders or number of head it'll carry. Another example we've got here is Brahman steers averaging 300 kilos growing over 9 months. Under previous systems, and the previous systems were based on either metabolic weight or proportion of 450 kilos, that animal would have been about 0.6 or 0.7 of a AE. But let's say we've got two examples, and these can be individual animals or mobs of animals. We've got one that's starting at 220 at the start of the 9 months and finishing at 380, still averaging 300, but gaining 0.6 kilos a day over that time, versus one that's starting at 270 and finishing at 330, still averaging 300 but gaining 0.2. Previously growth wasn't accounted for, just that average of 300 would be what was used to determine its AE rating. So if we go to the tables, we'll get to these tables later on, I just want to show this now. This is from the Bos Indicus table. And we look here for that 300 kilo animal at 0.2 kilos live weight gain, it's 0.79 AE. Whereas at 0.6, it's 1.1 AE. So there's a 40% difference in the energy required by those animals, and therefore a 40% difference in grazing load of those animals, which is a fairly significant factor when we're looking at AEs, which are a tool for grazing loads. So how has it developed? Well, initially Shane and I were working on it, had been for a while, and we based it initially on the British MAF tables. The British Ministry of Agriculture had some fairly widely used and handy equations called MAF tables to do it, and we'd done up a prototype concept based on that. And we discussed the concept with Meat and Livestock Australia, and they supported further development of the concept, provided it was based on the Australian feeding standards, because being an Australian system, they thought it should be based on the best science for here. So, and that book is The Nutrient Requirements of Domesticated Ruminants by Ciro in 2007, is what we refer to as the feeding standards. So, how did we look at it? Well, we looked at AE as being a unit of animal, which is a fairly important classification which we'll get through. It's quantified in terms of energy demand and based on animal-specific variables. And it is not based on animal pasture variables or other animal environment interactions. And we wanted to do that so that an AE, an animal under the same performance, had the same rating wherever it was located. We didn't want to have a different AE rating under different production systems or in a different quality country. And there was a chap in America named Skarnecchia who'd done a fair bit of thinking and writing about this, which we were able to refer to, which helped set us down the path. So the approach we took was to get the minimum number of animal-specific variables for maximum accuracy. We wanted to try and not complicate it too much, but get what we required to make it accurate. And we took those variables and applied them to the nutrient requirements of domesticated ruminants, or the Australian feeding standards, to give us the energy demand of animals relative to the adult equivalent standard. And that is what an AE rating is. It's the relative energy requirements of the animal that we're looking at, and we'll go through some examples later on, of that animal relative to the adult equivalent. So what are the variables that determine the energy requirements of an animal? And there's quite a lot. We've got them listed there. Age, breed, sex, weight, weight gain, pregnancy status, lactation status, weaning age and weight, and also activity and diet quality. We've got a question mark on activity and diet quality there because they're not animal-specific variables. The other ones we're looking at are all animal-specific variables, whereas the bottom two include environmental interactions, which we needed to work out how we handled that. So the issues with environmental interactions, diet quality, and also distance walked, which affects the energy required for activity by the animal. For diet quality, we were fortunate to be able to call on the cash cow project and also the beef CRC, or Queensland DPI, or DAF as it is now, data from the CRC work and the cash cow work. There was over 2,000 NIRS samples from across Northern Australia, which we were able to get and use. We just wanted to have a look at what was the spread of diet quality across Northern Australia and how do we treat this factor which has an influence on the energy requirements of animals in developing this AE methodology. And you can see there that's the diet quality expressed as megajoules of metabolizable energy per kilo of dry matter, the distribution of that from all that data across Northern Australia. You can see there it's fairly normally distributed with a median of 7.75. This is looking at it a bit differently. We've got the average of all the 2,000 here on the left-hand side. Then we've got the cash cow data broken up into the cash cow regions. Then the beef CRC or the QDAF data in total, and broken up in all the regions. So we can see there, even though there's a fairly big spread of diet quality, most of the results fall in a fairly narrow range. So what we did through the equations from the feeding standards, we said, okay, well, how does it affect the results if we change the diet quality? And we used these figures here, the first quartile, the median, and the third quartile to see. And we found that it had no significant or material effect on the absolute or relative AE ratings of animals by doing it like that. That allowed us to fix the diet quality in the equations at 7.75 megajoules, which is this median figure here, without having an effect on the AE ratings. So therefore it could be used everywhere, and diet quality didn't have to be an input we put in there. The other issue was distance walked for activity and the energy required for activity. And we did a literature review on this, and there's quite a lot of good information out there where research has been done on distance walked. And that's some of it there, and the report on this project lists it all in detail. But we wanted to look at whether we could make grazing radius or number of waters or paddock size an input. And we found that across it, there's no real relationship. The cattle walk a similar distance each day, regardless of distance to water and regardless of paddock size. Some of the research did find a relationship with number of waters or paddock sizes, but that wasn't replicated in other research. So we weren't able to put it in as an input. So we were able to fix it at that distance of 7 kilometres walked each day, which is about a midpoint from the data we looked at there. So how was it developed? Well, there. So just covering on from that, we fixed the diet quality at 7.75 megajoules, and we fixed the distance walked at 7 kilometres each day. So what is an adult equivalent? And this is the one that we base all the relativities of the other animals against. It's a 2.25-year-old 450 kilogram Bosch Taurus steer at maintenance, and maintenance means it's not gaining any weight, walking 7 kilometres a day and grazing on a 7.75 megajoule diet. Those are the variables that go into the equations to determine how much energy it requires, and we compare the other animals to that. So I might pull up briefly there for questions, Greg, if there is any.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to put to Ian and or Shane up to what's already been done? Okay. Yes. One of the questions we have here, Ian, is when and how is the proposed methodology reviewed and accepted by the wider scientific community?
I'll pick that one up, Greg. The process we went through in developing the product, there were 2 technical reviews with nutritionists and extension staff at that time, and I guess it's in the public domain now, so it's open to review and critique publicly.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, another question. If you look at the start weight and the end weight of a dry, empty beast over a period, shouldn't the difference in AE for each of the weights be the same as what the additional AE rating would be for each of the ADGs?
Can we just hold that one over and we'll pull that up in the spreadsheets? It
okay.
might be better answered in that session there.
That's not a problem.
Request for the last slide.
Okay, there's one request there for the last slide, and if I can get the person who asked the question, if they could just ask a little bit more detail about what that might be, that would be good. One of the questions is, what are the conversions of AE to DSE?
There's no rigorous mathematical conversion.
But based on metabolic weight, it's 7 to 1, but we've not yet put sheep through this to be able to give a definitive conversion.
Okay, we'll just take one final question before we move forward, and the question is, could you please expand on the concept that distance to water appears to be not a significant variable?
It's inconsistent, and we looked through, and it's listed in the final report for this, which is available on the MLA website. There was research that did find that the distance to water did make a statistically significant difference in the distance walked each day, and there were other research trials that found that it did not, and it wasn't replicated. So the broad result of it all is that the cattle walk a similar distance each day, regardless of distance to water and paddock size. But if you look at the literature review that's in the report, all of the research we looked at for that is listed there.
Okay. In the interest of time, if we can just keep going here, that would be great.
Okay, so this is the energy requirements of the adult equivalent, that 2.25-year-old Bosch Taurus steer weighing 450 kilograms, not gaining weight, requires 54.7 megajoules for maintenance and 17.9 megajoules of energy a day for activity. It's not growing, and obviously being a dry animal, it's not pregnant or lactating. So from those equations, it gives us 72.6 megajoules of metabolizable energy a day, and that is the reference that we compare the others back to, and we'll go through some of that and some of the tools shortly with Shane. So how do you use it? A number of different ways for it to be used. You can calculate the grazing load of your herd in total, the number of animal adult equivalents. By class, you can see how much of your grazing load is being used by breeders, heifers, steers, bullocks, etc. And by energy usage, see what energy is going into maintenance, growth, pregnancy, lactation. And calculate monthly requirements by class for feed budgeting and ensuring that you're matching the energy requirements to feed availability, and we'll see that in some of the tools we go through shortly. And you can decide on stocking for the class. 1000 AE is 650 bullocks or 1220 weaners, depending on their factors. So what are the outputs of it? There's a number of tools. There's a whole herd tool, and we'll run through all of these soon. An individual class tool, AE tables, which are static. The AE tables are for Bos Taurus, Bos Indicus, Crossbred, European and Limousin. They're the same for all of them, and we had to do that because the breed of the animal has an influence on its energy there. The weaning rate across the mob, this will give the average annual AE rating for all of those in that mob, productive and non-productive animals. Pregnant females, weight again, days pregnant, so conception through to end of pregnancy, then from birth through to 180 days of lactation. There's one of those tables for each of the breed types we looked at previously. So pull up briefly again for questions, Greg, and then I'll hand over to Shane, who'll go through some of the spreadsheets.
Okay. Yep, we have a question. Could you please expand, no, we've already asked that one. The MEUs would equate to a digestibility level of almost 54%, which is well above what we would see during the dry season. Also, did you account for the differences in walking distances between the dry season and wet season and their interaction with ME changes? I know it's a double-loaded question, but we can tackle them any way you like.
One at a time, I guess, is the best way to do it. Yes, there is a variation in ME across the year, but we've just taken that distribution, and given that those are the data available, taken that as the proxy for the 12-month distribution. As we said, there's not a radical difference moving from the lower to the upper quartile, so using that median figure seemed to us a reasonable proposition. Second part?
Okay.
Differences in walking distance.
Yep.
Again, the point that I'd like to make about walking distance isn't that cattle don't walk different distances, or they do, but there is so much variation in there that an inconsistency based on the environment that the cattle are in, that it was not repeatable. So that's why we went with a fixed distance walk per day.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another quick question. Is the annualised breeder rate incorporating the weaner requirements or just reflecting the lactating breeder's energy requirements?
If that one could just hold over until we hit the spreadsheets as well, Greg, we'll address that at that point.
Okay, alrighty.
So just to change screens. Is that showing up?
Yes.
Okay. We'll move now to the model itself, and that is not working as we'd like. Let me just move that over. Okay. The spreadsheet is composed of two dashboards, if you like. One is a whole herd model and the other is an individual animal model. If we could look at the whole herd model to begin with, and in the interest of time we've pre-populated some of the model, but let's just walk through say the breeder component, populate that. We started off with a theoretical herd of 1,000 mature breeders, 200 first calf heifers, joiner heifers, yearling heifers. We need to nominate the age of the bulls on entry, the age of the females at first joining, their drop-down menus, which we can flick between 15 months, and that takes out one category of heifer, or 27 months at first joining, which brings that category back in, and an average weaning age. So if we start with the breeder herd, the female herd rather, let's say those heifers are weaned at 180 kg. They'll transit from the weaner group at say 275 kilos. Based on the anniversary of average conception, it determines at least a theoretical time in that weaner class. The 275 kg then informs the starting weight of the next category. Assume they're in there to 400 kg of weight for 12 months, again based on that annual average conception time. As joiner heifers, let's say they finish their time in that group at 475 kg. Moving into the first calf heifers, still growing at 525, and for the purpose of this argument, or this case, we'll say that they maintain their average weight in the mature breeding group, and they're in that mature breeding group for 5 years. We nominate the reproductive performance of each of those female groups. So we'll run with an 85% pregnancy rate, and keeping figures round, let's say that converts to a 75% calving rate. The first calf heifers will run with 80% converting to 70%, and the joiner heifers have a pregnancy rate of 0.85 or 85%. They don't obviously have a calving rate. These bottom 3 rows of the input table allow user-defined categories. So let's say we'll put some yearling steers in there. Oh, sorry, as a drop-down. Just as bought-in cattle, we'll assign a breed. I should have said that these genotype categories are all on drop-down menus. You have the capacity to put an entry weight in there. So we'll assume there's 200 of those bought-in steers coming in at 325, going out at 450 feedlot weight, and we'll nominate a 9-month. In this case, we have to select the unit of time, so 9 months. No reproductive performance. So that's the data entry side. Do we take a quick question at that point, Ian, on the data entry?
Okay. Does anyone have any questions that we've covered up to date in relation to anything, but in particular the data entry that Shane has just gone through? Okay, just a couple of questions. Does the model account for within breed variation?
within breed variation. No, if we select a breed, we take the algorithms of the feeding standards and apply it to that breed.
Okay.
Of course, there is a crossbreed variation accounted for.
Okay. All right. So that may relate into what happens if you don't know the pedigree of the animal.
Pedigree or breed type?
Pedigree.
I guess it's not driven by pedigree. It's driven by breed type, and I guess if you can't select a breed, just decide it's a crossbred or a composite. Okay. Just by way there, let's just pull up a drop-down menu. There's your selection of breed types.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Is there a drop-down menu for feral or native animals?
No, as in goats and koalas, or
yes, kangaroos.
Kangaroos. No, there's not. It's something that has been exercising our mind.
This is confined to the grazing load from cattle, which is different from the total grazing pressure on the place, and that's also important. This is confined to the grazing load from the cattle.
Okay. Yep. Thanks. Thanks.
Okay. Just quickly looking at the output from those data. First, we have a simple Gantt chart. I guess a graphical representation of the herd, not numbers of cattle, but just the time that those individual classes are in the herd. This is the AE calculation per se. AE ratings are broken into a daily AE rating and an annualised AE rating. In the case of the mature breeders, they're in there the full year, the full cycle. Based on those production parameters, that mature breeder equates to 1.48 AE per day, or as a daily rating. Because she's there for the 12 months, that equates to 1.48 annualised. If we come down here, say to the cull cows, for example, 1.33 AE at a daily rate, but because she's only there for 6 months, she's given a 0.67 annualised AE rating. Similarly with those bought-in steers, 1.2 per day, 0.9 annualised. Grazing load is extended out, taking that annualised AE rating and multiplying it by the number of cattle. That then yeah, so we've got our percentages of the grazing load by each of those classes of cattle. Here it is represented graphically. The mature breeders take up 40%. Bulls take up, sorry, not mature breeders, the breeding group. And in this case, that's the joined females. Bulls, heifers, unjoined heifers, both weaners and in the replacement group. Castrates, all the steers on the place, cull cows and those bought in steers in this case. We've also shown the segmentation of energy use across the herd. 3/4 of the energy used in that herd biomass goes to maintenance. In this example, 17% goes to growth, pregnancy, lactation. The yellow bit is the energy consumed by the calf as pasture. That's it for the breeder herd model. So questions on that output element of the model?
Okay. some more questions. Where do you get the AE ratings from?
Okay. The AE ratings are based on the calculations of energy demand for those for that particular class of animals, physiological state and its production. So again, a breeding cow of that live weight, not gaining weight, 85% pregnant, 75% calved down, weaning the calves at 5 months at gives us a 1.4 AE. Essentially, that is saying that that category of animal needs about 110 megajoules of ME per day divided by 72 ME. That's where we get those ratings from.
Okay, thank you for that. Did you consider expressing the ADG for each class?
We come to that in the next, not by class, but the individual animal we show an ADG.
Okay.
It was just, yeah, made the screen a bit busy.
Okay, so we might just keep going with that. I'm conscious of time.
Okay. In looking at the individual animals, we'll run through two scenarios fairly smartly. Okay. In the first instance, we'll look at growing steers. This is already populated, I apologise. So select the category of cattle we want to look at. Again, select the breed. Time, we can enter age on entry, either in years or months. Starting weight, so we're bringing these fellas in at 300 kg. A closing weight of 450 kilos, and here is our expression as 0.5 kilos. Average daily gain based on a September entry and June the 1st exit, which in determining how this model runs is a proxy for the 31st of May. So the output from that group we should have said, come back up a little. Yeah, so animals performing at that level have a monthly average AE of 1.31. This is similar to the daily AE rating we had earlier. They're only there for 9 months though, so that annualised AE is 0.98. Now, the glaring departure from real life here is we've assumed a linear growth rate. So there's no capacity for this model to vary growth rate according to pasture quality through the course of the grazing period. Also, just on this slide, it's probably easy to visualise the monthly versus the annualised. That, for example, you put a paddock aside for these bought-in steers or the weaned steers. They're only there for 9 months, but that paddock is allocated for 12 months, and hence the annualised rating. Coming down to some other charts similar to before. 2/3 of the energy for that group of cattle for the time they were there was used for maintenance, 1/3 for growth, and here it is just expressed month by month. Energy use or energy requirement increases as live weight increases, so that's mainly as a result of increase in energy required for maintenance for the heavier cattle, and on top of that we have our requirement for growth each month. Questions on that section, Greg?
Okay. How come energy requirement for calf is not included in AE for breeders at equivalent to 1.48 in the example quoted?
It is, and we'll come to that next.
Okay, alrighty. Is there any co-development work being done through MLA between the new AE calculations and the new feed efficiency EBV being developed in breed plan?
No idea. You'd have to, I suppose, talk to MLA about that one.
Okay. And I do see that we have one question in here which I'm sure that we'll get to at the end, and that's how do we get this spreadsheet?
I'll put my email address up at the end, and anyone that wants it can send me an email and we'll send it back.
Alrighty.
Onwards.
Yeah, we'll keep going.
We'll run another scenario for the individual animal, this time based on mature breeders. We'll run with, say, a drought master cow. In this case, because we're dealing with mature breeders, we'll run, instead of age on entry, we'll go with the average age for the group, and we'll select the time units. Starting weight in that group, 525 kg, no growth, so again 525 kg. Pregnancy, 85%, calving 75%, average weaning weight 200 kg, calf genotype, just to mix it up, let's call the calf a composite, assuming there was a composite or another breed of bull across. We'll run on a 12-month scenario here, so we'll just go with July to July, remembering that July the 1st is actually a proxy for June 30 in this case. Average month of conception, we'll say New Year's Day, and wean, this is average weaning across the group of calves in April. That then gives us our monthly AE. Because it's for 12 months, the annualised AE is the same. And the earlier question was accommodating the grazing calf. Here we have in blue the energy required for the cow. So you see her stepping up in energy in that last trimester of pregnancy, calving down, moving up to as the demand for lactation comes on, stays high. The yellow represents the grazing feed intake by the calf. So lactation still places a high energy demand upon the cow, then starts to wane. As it wanes, though, the feed intake by the calf increases, so the energy demand of the cow-calf complex stays quite high through that, that lactation period. Here we have weaning, so the energy demand of the cow drops down, and in that mid-trimester of pregnancy doesn't add much to the energy demand in the cow. Coming down, we've got our apportionment of energy use across the group for the year. 70% to maintenance, nothing for growth, a little to pregnancy, 17% to lactation, and 9% to the calf. So about a quarter of the energy is used for calf nutrition. Here we have maintenance, increasing slightly as production demands change the efficiency of use. The big energy demands above maintenance though are for lactation, and again lactation falling off, calf pasture intake increasing, and the smaller incremental demand for pregnancy really only a consequence in that last couple of months. Let's this is the critical point. We've nominated a January conception date. She still has a hell of an energy demand on her at that November, December, January period when half of them need to get in calf to meet that that January reconception date.
And obviously this shows it for assuming that they all conceive on the 1st of January, which isn't reality, and that the wider that joining period or calving period, the wider this is. But this shows what the shape of the curve is for an individual animal, or what those requirements are, yeah, which is important.
Okay.
Okay.
Questions?
Yep. Wouldn't the weight variation and genetic variation across a mob in a paddock override some of the adjustments that are made to AE?
Let me get my head around the question. So
I could, do you want me to
read it again?
I'll reread. Wouldn't the weight variation and genetic variation across a mob in a paddock override some of the adjustments that are made to adult equivalents?
In a purely theoretical sense, no doubt. In a practical sense, we have enough of a challenge determining weights for the mob without running models to account for individual weights. The purpose of this is to provide us with a tool to approximate grazing load or evaluate the capacity of a particular piece of country. I don't think we can represent it as a tool to provide very fine detail in modelling an individual animal's energy demand and grazing behaviour.
Okay. Another question is, why not incorporate calf energy with lactation energy in the AE calculated for breeders, as in the table presented earlier in the webinar?
I'll answer part of that, and Ian can answer part of it.
I'm not sure what table that is we look back, but the difference between lactation and calf is one is what's coming from the mother, and the yellow is what the calf's fending for himself, and we're including the calf up until weaning in the breeding unit. So work out the AE rating, the 1.48, I think this one was, for the breeder. That includes all of the energy requirements of that calf up until the point it is weaned.
I like the idea of representing the calf pasture intake or energy from pasture intake separately, because it shows to some extent the wisdom of early weaning when things get tight, that this calf is largely fending for itself in that last month. It's well on its way to fending for itself in the second last month. So coming in early doesn't place an insurmountable load on that calf. So I think there's a utility to having it expressed separately.
Okay. Another quick question. How does the model cope with live weight loss? For example,
Indeed.
Breeders feeding calves or with dry season feed gap?
Yep. It doesn't. It's a decision that we took that we deal in the cycle, but it is a point, and if it's felt that it's necessary, it's something that we could add in there.
Okay. I have a question for myself. Obviously it's very complex, it's technical. How does anyone get any more information on this?
There's a full technical report from the project available on the MLA website, which explains a lot more on the approach, the science behind it, and how we came up with it. So have a look at that for more information.
Okay. Another quick question is, how have you used it so far?
I've used it quite a lot with clients, working out all those things we went through before. Total grazing load for the mob, using the tool from that basis, and also going through that individual class tool to look just the different requirements and how we can stock paddocks differently. So it has a number of different uses.
I've used it with clients where clients looking to sell their places, where we've had historical information on cattle populations over the last 3 or 4 years, and we've been able to run those and demonstrate that the AE ratings that we had on them were legitimate. Similarly, I've used it for clients looking to buy properties and model what we could run on those places.
Okay. I'm very conscious of time, ladies and gentlemen, and as I expected, we do have a number of questions that are coming in, and unfortunately we're not going to be able to get through them all. I'll just do one last question. How is this practically applied when doing a forage budget? Do you need to do a month-by-month forage budget to account for changes in ME requirements of animals at different times of the year?
The forage budgeting question is the one that we're, and not just Ian and myself, but quite a few people are turning their minds to at the moment. I wouldn't do month by month. I'd look at the period that I had those cattle in there, or the period until I can next do a pasture assessment, and run it for that 3 months. If it's 3 months between pasture assessments, run it for the 9 months. If you're putting steers into a paddock and they're going to be there for 9 months, you're in the end of the wet season, that's how much feed's there, run it to that. But I don't think there's a recommendation of one way to run it. You would just model your whole herd in some instances, or use it in very tactical and specific situations in others.
Okay, just a few more questions. How do historical records line up with calculated carrying capacity for properties?
I've had properties where I've tried to do this and the historical records were inadequate, but 2 properties, one a breeding operation and one a backgrounding operation, quite substantial places, about 10,000 AE capacity each, and their records were adequate, and it reconciled well with then going back and estimating, I guess, the feed that was available at the time, matching the grazing load under this calculation.
Yeah, so I've got my contact details up on the top of that slide there. If you've got any questions, or if you'd like the spreadsheet tools, please get in touch with me. And also got a plug in there for the Business Hedge workshops, which we're holding over the next couple of months, and the early bird for Kingaroy and Roma end next week. So if you want any more information on that, visit the website or give me a call also.
Okay. Thanks Ian. I am obviously very conscious of time, ladies and gentlemen, to try and keep within the time constraints. As I expected, we do have a lot of questions that have come in that we were unable to get through. So I will pass all those questions on to today's presenters, and they can respond to you for those questions at a later stage. So in closing up today, I'd just like to thank Ian and Shane for their time and their insights today into the new methodology for adult equivalence. It's obviously very technical, topical, and a relevant issue. So thank you to both, and for helping us understand the topic a little better. Obviously these Beef Connect webinars are a partnership between Beef Central and Future Beef, and it would be remiss of me not to mention the daily emails that come out from Beef Central that are sent out. If you'd like to sign up, pop on over to beefcentral.com and do so. Also, don't forget to visit our Future Beef website. It's your one-stop shop for beef information across Northern Australia. In due course, you'll find today's webinar recording there. But as I said earlier, I will send everyone who is registered with an email the magic link for that. And while you're at the website, don't forget to sign up to receive our e-bulletins. That way you'll be sure to hear of our future webinars. Obviously, we will be asking your feedback today from this session, and we will be using Survey Monkeys for our follow-up surveys, and the monkeys will be waiting for your responses. So folks, that's all for today. I'd like to again thank Ian and Shane for sharing their knowledge with us, and a big thank you to you all for attending and coming along and interacting with us. It's been a pleasure having you with us today. So all the best, and until the next time we connect, and it's Guru for now.